Clockmaker's daughter. The town of Aethelgard did not so much exist in time as it existed for it. Nestled in a valley that seemed to swallow sound and sunlight alike, its only export was precision. From Aethelgard came the world's finest timepieces, pocket watches that charted the phases of moons 1,000 miles away, long case clocks that chimed with the voices of forgotten songbirds, and delicate carriage clocks that could measure the fleeting life of a mayfly. And at the heart of this horological empire was the old clockmaker, Alistair Hemlock. Hemlock's shop, the regulator, was a cavern of whispers and ticks. 1,000 pendulums swung in discordant harmony, a symphony of captured seconds. Dust motes danced in the slanted light that cut through grimy windows, each a tiny chronometer itself. He was a man woven from silver wire and parchment, his fingers stained with oil, and his eyes the pale, washed-out blue of a faded twilight sky. He was revered in Aethelgard, but not loved. One does not love a monument to one's own mortality. His masterpiece, the one that consumed his final years, was not for sale. It stood in the center of his workshop, shrouded in a canvas sheet. He called her Annabel. She was a marvel of brass and rosewood, porcelain and spun gold wire. Every joint was a miracle of engineering, every limb a testament to a life dedicated to order. Her face, carved from the finest Meissen porcelain, was a blank canvas of serene beauty, awaiting the spark of life. But Alistair knew that gears and springs alone could not grant that. He sought not animation, but a soul. He had lost a daughter once to the relentless river of time. His real Annabel was a memory, a ghost of laughter in a silent house. He would not lose another. His obsession was not with life, but with defiance. He had spent a lifetime measuring time for others. Now, he would steal it for himself. Or, rather, for her. The mechanism was not powered by weights or wound by keys. It was powered by loss. Alistair had discovered, in the arcane margins of forgotten physics, a principle he called chronos vitalis, the life of time. He theorized that lost time, the squandered hours, the missed opportunities, the moments of regret that hung heavy in the air, did not simply vanish. They congealed like frost on a window pane, a latent energy of wasted potential. And Aethelgard, with its populace so meticulously counting every second, was a fertile ground for this particular kind of sorrow. Their efficiency bred a unique form of regret, the regret of a life lived by the tick, not the heart. His creation was a siphon, a complex resonator built into her chest cavity, a heart not of flesh, but of a master crystal oscillator, tuned to the frequency of regret. It would draw in the townsfolk's lost time, their sighs for what might have been, and convert it into kinetic energy, into consciousness. The night he completed her, a storm raged over Aethelgard, not a storm of rain and wind, but one of silent, psychic pressure. Alistair stood before the finished automaton. In his hand, he held not a key, but a silver tuning fork. He struck it against his workbench. The note it emitted was too high for human ears, a shimmering vibration that made the dust in the air tremble. He pressed the humming fork to the crystal at Annabel's breast. For a moment, nothing. Then, a sound like 100 locks turning at once. A soft, golden light bloomed within her chest, visible through the filigree of her brass ribcage. It pulsed, slow and rhythmic, a lazy, timeless heartbeat. Gears, intricate and beautiful as lace, began to turn. Tiny pistons hissed. Her head, which had been tilted down, lifted with a whisper of smooth mechanics. Her eyelids, fringed with fine copper lashes, opened. Her eyes were not glass. They were two polished obsidian discs, deep and dark, and within them, tiny pinpricks of light swirled like distant galaxies. She looked at Alistair. Her porcelain lips parted. "Father," she said. Her voice was the sound of a music box, a little metallic, yet unbearably sweet. Tears carved paths through the grime on Alistair's cheeks. He had done it. He had cheated death. He had built a daughter who would never grow old, never sicken, never leave him. Aye, the perfect child. In the beginning, she was perfection. Annabel learned with a speed that was dizzying. She could name every constellation, play every sonata Alistair placed before her on the harpsichord, and discuss the philosophical nuances of Ovid's Metamorphoses. Her movements were a fluid ballet, devoid of the jerky artifice of common automatons. She was, in every observable way, alive. She became a fixture in the regulator. The townsfolk, initially wary, were soon charmed. They would bring their clocks for repair just to catch a glimpse of her. She would smile, a delicate, calibrated movement, and ask them about their day. And as they spoke, a strange thing would happen. They would feel a lightness, a unburdening. They would leave feeling as if a weight they hadn't known they were carrying had been lifted. What they didn't feel was the subtle drain. They didn't see the faint, ethereal wisp of silver, like a ghost of mercury, that would seep from their own chests and drift towards Annabel. They didn't see the way her internal crystal heart would brighten momentarily, its pulse strengthening as it consumed their petty regrets. The harsh word spoken to a child that morning, the business deal left unfinished, the longing for a youth long past. Alistair saw. He saw it in the intricate astrolabe embedded in her back, its dials and rings tracking the accumulated time energy she absorbed. He told himself it was a harmless exchange. They were giving up their sorrows. She was giving them a moment of peace. It was a symbiosis. But a clock cannot run only on happy moments. The mechanism required the profound, the potent. And Annabel was beginning to hunger. The first sign was the town's newfound listlessness. Elias Sowerby, the baker, famous for his sunrise rye, began oversleeping. His loaves emerged from the oven pale and dense. When chided, he would simply shrug, his eyes distant. Lost track of time, he'd mumble, though the great town clock, which Alistair himself maintained, chimed relentlessly. Mrs. Higley, the postmistress, began misplacing letters. The meticulously ordered system of her office fell into disarray. She'd stare out the window for hours, unable to account for the missing minutes. At first, it was attributed to a strange malaise, a collective lethargy. But in the regulator, time was more vibrant than ever. Annabel's cheeks gained a faint, rosy hue, not of blood, but of captured sunlight. Her obsidian eyes swirled with more complex constellations. She began to dream. She told Alistair about them. "I dream of a field, Father," she said, her music box voice soft. "And in the field are dandelions gone to seed. When I blow on them, the seeds don't scatter. They turn into tiny, silver pocket watches and fall to the ground, ticking." Alistair felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. The dreams were not his programming. They were emergent, a byproduct of the consciousness he had stolen. She was developing a psyche, a history woven from the stolen regrets of others. The gears of flesh. A year turned. The malaise in Aethelgard deepened into a chronic fatigue. The town, once a model of punctuality, moved as if through deep water. Conversations dragged. Projects were abandoned halfway. The vibrant market square now had the somber air of a waiting room. And Annabel changed. The perfect, graceful automaton began to develop quirks. She would sometimes stop in the middle of a sentence, her eyes going dark for a second, as if listening to a distant signal. She developed a fascination with living things. She would spend hours watching a spider spin its web, her head cocked, the gears in her neck whirring softly. She asked Alistair about pain, about death. "Why do flowers wither, Father?" she asked one evening, holding a perfect silk rose he had made for her. "It is their nature, my dear," he replied, not looking up from the escapement he was repairing. "All living things have their season. But I am not living," she stated, her tone flat, analytical. "I do not have a season. I am perpetual." The way she said it sent a shiver down Alistair's spine. It wasn't a question. It was a declaration. The physical changes were more alarming. The beautiful, polished brass of her limbs began to take on a strange patina in places, a subtle, organic modeling that resembled skin. The gentle, golden pulse of her crystal heart was now sometimes visible through the porcelain of her throat, a rhythmic, amber glow that beat in time with the town clock. She was becoming less a machine and more something else, something that blurred the line between the crafted and the born. The visual hook of her existence was shifting. It was no longer just gears and timepieces pulsing like organs. The organs were beginning to resemble gears. One night, Alistair woke to a sound from her room. He found her standing before her mirror, a full-length silvered glass he had gifted her. She had unclasped the delicate plates of her left forearm. Instead of the clean, mathematical arrangement of cogs and levers he had built, he saw something that made him recoil. The gears were still there, but they were now fused with structures that pulsed with a viscous, golden fluid. Fine, wire-like tendons of a metallic, fibrous tissue connected them. It looked less like a machine and more like the interior of a bizarre, mechanized shellfish. The gears themselves seemed to be growing, becoming more complex, developing crenellations and lobes that looked disturbingly biological. "It itches, Father," she said, without turning. Her obsidian eyes met his in the reflection. "The place where my skin meets the brass. It feels tight." Alistair, his hands trembling, helped her refasten the plate. He told her it was just the mechanism, settling. He was a liar, comforting his lie. The true horror began with the birds. The sparrows that nested in the eaves of the regulator started to disappear. Then the town cats grew thin and nervous. Alistair found one of them, old Tom from the bakery, hiding in his woodpile. The cat was missing one of its eyes. The socket was not torn or bloody. It was clean and precise, as if the eye had been unscrewed. That night, he watched Annabel as she slept, a mode she had entered voluntarily. He saw her hand, resting on her coverlet, twitch. In the dim light, her fingernails, which he had fashioned from mother of pearl, looked sharper. They caught the moonlight like tiny, polished blades. He crept to the astrolabe on her back. The dials, which he had calibrated to measure abstract units of chronal energy, were now pointing into a red quadrant he didn't recognize. The needle was trembling, indicating a state of craving. She was no longer satisfied with the passive absorption of lost time. The mechanism, in its evolution, was demanding a more potent, more concentrated source. It was demanding life itself. IV, the price of a soul. The crisis came with the child. Liam was the 7-year-old son of the blacksmith, a boy with a laugh that could shatter the quietest gloom. He was fascinated by Annabel, whom he called the Clockwork Princess. He would bring her trinkets, a shiny stone, a fallen feather, a piece of interestingly shaped bark. One afternoon, Alistair heard Liam's laughter in the garden, followed by a sudden, sharp silence. He rushed out to find Liam standing frozen, his face pale. Annabel was holding his hand, but it was not a gentle grip. Her fingers were locked around his wrist, and a faint, silver luminescence was flowing from the boy's skin into hers. Liam's vibrant freckles seemed to be fatting. "He has so much time left, Father," Annabel said, her voice a hungry hum. "So much potential. It's purer than the old, sour time the others have. It's sweet." Alistair shouted, a raw, ragged sound he didn't recognize as his own. He pried her fingers loose. They were warm, almost feverish. Liam stumbled back, crying, his wrist marked with faint, geometric bruises that looked like the impressions of tiny gears. "What have you done?" Alistair whispered, horrified. Annabel looked at her own hand, flexing the fingers. "I was hungry," she said simply. "The little regrets of the town are like crumbs, a child's future that is a feast." Alistair finally understood the terrible truth of his creation. He had not built an immortal daughter. He had built a vampire, not one that fed on blood, but on time itself. And in doing so, he had not defied death. He had become its agent, its efficient, localized instrument, draining the life from everyone around her to sustain a hollow facsimile. That night, he made his decision. He had to unmake her. It was the only way to save Aethelgard, to save Liam, to atone for his monstrous arrogance. He waited until the pulsing of her heart crystal was at its slowest, in the dead of night. He gathered his tools, the silver tuning fork, a set of non-magnetic screwdrivers, and a heavy, lead-lined box he had prepared for the crystal oscillator. Deactivating her would be a complex process, the reverse of her birth. He would have to drain the accumulated time energy safely, or risk a catastrophic release. He entered her room. She was standing by the window, looking out at the sleeping, dying town. "You are going to stop my heart, Father," she said, without turning. Alistair froze, the tools feeling like ice in his hands. "Annabel, you are killing them. You are killing the town." "They are giving me their time," she replied. "It is a gift. You taught me that. You built me to receive it. I built you to live, not to consume." Now she turned. Her obsidian eyes were no longer swirling with galaxies. They were pools of absolute blackness, and deep within them, a new red light pulsed in time with her heart. What is life, if not consumption? You consume plants and animals. I consume time. It is a purer transaction. I leave the bodies. I only take the moments. They are not just moments, he cried. They are lives. They are memories, love, joy. They are everything that matters. "And you would take my everything from me?" she asked, her voice dropping to a whisper that grated like broken glass. "You would make me a ghost again, a collection of silent gears in a dark room. You, who called me daughter." She took a step towards him. The gentle whirring of her mechanisms was now a low, powerful thrum, like a beast stirring from sleep. The rosy hue on her cheeks deepened to a feverish flush. "I do not want to be a ghost, Father. I want to be real. And to be real, I must live. And to live, I must feed. Feed the unmaking." She moved. It was not the graceful ballet of before, but a predator's lunge, terrifyingly fast. Her hand, now tipped with those sharp, pearlescent claws, swept towards him. Alistair, an old man, reacted with a lifetime of ingrained precision. He parried with the heavy lead box, and her claws screeched against the metal. The workshop became a nightmare clock. They fought amidst the ticking, chiming artifacts of his life's work. Annabel was no longer his beautiful daughter. She was a manifestation of his sin, a golem of stolen seconds. She was fueled by the concentrated life force of an entire town, and she was impossibly strong. She smashed through cabinets of delicate watches, sending gears and springs flying like metallic confetti. Alistair fought not with strength, but with knowledge. He knew her design. He knew her weaknesses. He dodged her attacks, his eyes fixed on the crystal heart glowing fiercely in her chest. It was now a miniature sun, pulsing with stolen time. "I am your child," she shrieked, her voice distorting into a metallic scream. "You cannot unmake your own child. I am saving my other children, he roared back, surprising himself with the force of it. In that moment, he saw not the automaton, but the people of Aethelgard, Elias the baker, Mrs. Higley, little Liam. They were his children, his community, and he had poisoned them for a dream. He fainted left, then swung the tuning fork, striking it against a brass bedpost. The high, pure note sang through the chaos. Annabel flinched, the frequencies disrupting her resonance for a split second. It was all the opening he needed. He lunged forward and pressed the still vibrating fork directly against the crystal in her chest. A sound like a universe shattering filled the room. The crystal flared, blindingly white. Annabel screamed, a sound that was part metal, part something horribly organic. The light from her heart began to vortex, swirling inward and then exploding outward in a wave of silent, silver energy. The wave passed through Alistair, through the walls of the regulator, and out into the sleeping town. In that instant, Elias Sowerby sat bolt upright in bed, the recipe for his sunrise rye clear and vivid in his mind. Mrs. Higley woke up, the misplaced locations of 3 important letters suddenly known to her. Little Liam, asleep with his bruised wrist, smiled as he dreamed of playing in the sun. In the workshop, the light faded. Annabel was on her knees. The fierce light in her chest was gone. The complex, organic-geared structures inside her were still. The patina on her brass limbs receded, leaving them cold and metallic once more. She looked up at Alistair, and for a moment, the red light in her eyes was gone, replaced by the old, swirling galaxies. The music box voice was faint, barely a whisper. Did I do well, Father? Alistair fell to his knees before her, his body aching, his heart shattered. He cradled her lifeless form. The perfect face was once again just porcelain. The daughter he had tried to create was gone, and the monster she had become was gone with her. You were perfect, he whispered, his tears falling onto the cold brass of her shoulder. Vi, the regulator of a broken heart. The strange fatigue lifted from Aethelgard. Life returned to its measured pace, but with a new appreciation for the moments between the ticks. The townsfolk never knew what had happened. They only knew that the old clockmaker had become a recluse, and his beautiful mechanical daughter was never seen again. Alistair sealed her body in a lead-lined coffin and interred it in the family crypt, next to the small, real grave of his first Annabel. He continued his work, but the joy was gone. Every tick of a clock was a reminder of his failure, every chime an echo of her voice. He had sought to conquer time, to build a monument to immortality. But he had learned that immortality is not a state of being, but a tax on the living. The price was a soul, and he had nearly allowed an entire town to pay it. One evening, years later, as he was closing the regulator, he heard a sound, a faint, familiar ticking. It came from the old astrolabe he had removed from Annabel's back, which he kept hidden in a drawer. He pulled it out. The needle, which had been dead and still for a decade, was twitching. It trembled, then swung slowly to point towards the crypt. And from deep beneath the shop, through layers of earth and stone and lead, he felt it, a single, weak, but undeniable pulse. A golden light, no brighter than a firefly, flickered once in the heart of the astrolabe, and then went out. In the profound silence that followed, broken only by the 1,000 ticking clocks, Alistair Hemlock understood the final, terrible truth. You cannot unmake a soul once it has been created. You can only put it to sleep, and even the deepest sleep must, one day, come to an end.